Wait, where are you? There we go. Okay. So Mike, do you want to just come up here? I think you'll be on camera and
Okay.
you'll hear
Got the audio transcription going.
primarily going through this. So
Okay.
there's your video.
All right, great. Sound. All right. Good evening and welcome to the Crystal and Pentagon Cities Council meeting for September 24th, 2024. The overall mission of the CPCC is to provide with staff support, periodic monitoring, evaluation, and identification of emerging issues and potential solutions on all dimensions of implementing the Crystal City Sector Plan and the Pentagon City Sector Plan to assure achievement of the plan's goals and objectives over the life of the plans. Our quorum tonight is 9 people, and we are above that. So I think later we need to do an e-meeting policy approval. So I think we're good for that. Okay, so we're holding this virtual meeting today in accordance with the e-meeting policy adopted last year. But at the end of the evening, we'll review the new policy and we'll have a quick vote to approve that. Okay, so our agenda tonight, we're going to do a development update. The normal one we do, we've got some folks from the Transportation Department online to give some transportation updates for 22202. The parking study that was in progress on 23rd Street last time we met, that's been finished up, and got some folks to go through a summary of their conclusions and recommendations. Robert Vaughn has undertaken an analysis of the AHIF contributions. So recall, we've got a affordable housing goal that's stated a number of units, but most of the time the developers make big cash contributions to a fund. And so the question on the table was, well, how do you count against the units if you're making cash contributions? And so Robert's got a cut at that. He'll go over tonight. And then we'll look quickly at the e-meeting policy update and review it, go over any questions and do a quick vote on it. We're on the hook to finish by 8 tonight, so we'll keep it moving pretty promptly. Okay, so let's start off. I want to cover development updates.
All right. Second, share the screen. So I think most of us are familiar with this format, but probably timely to kind of just keep coming back to where we are with the various projects. Again, we try to organize these by the label that we have with the county in terms of as these applications come in. Staff initially deals with the conceptual plan, which is generally staff reviewed. We provide some comments. Sometimes applications proceed. Sometimes they go away if they didn't like what they heard. But if they do, they become preliminary applications. And at that point, there's more of us involved in the review process. We check for technical elements that are included, make sure that we have enough plans to begin the formal process. And finally, the final stage of what we call final site plan applications is really not when they're done being reviewed, but when they're ready for the public review. So we've gotten all the drawings we need, and the plan is ready for that next stage of involvement. So, what's it doing?
In PowerPoint, yeah, switching to the swap.
Or swap it, yeah.
Try that.
Magnify, high presenter view. There we go. It's all. So these are the 3 categories that the next few slides utilize to track the different site plans that we have. So the first one that we start with are just the approvals. So this is a growing list. You'll notice here kind of the last couple of additions since I think we last met, number 16 and 17. These are the phase development site plans. So not real projects, but really a framework of future growth that actual projects can take advantage of later on, pending their own separate review. So the Pentagon Center, number 16, and the 12th Street Landing phase development site plans were the 2 that got approved, I believe in July and September, respectively. So we've added them to the approval list. Everything else has been approved prior to that, and you can see kind of the tracking. Again, major development in Crystal City and Pentagon City. Separate from those, this is where we transition to those active, or what we consider final applications. These are in various stages of public review. So the ones that we are tracking are the Crystal City Block W, number 18 down here by the Airport Access Road, which is also known 2525 Crystal Drive. We have 19, which is Crystal Plaza Apartments, and then finally River House to the left here in number 20. So those are all at various stages that I'll get into what our schedule looks like. And then finally, the preliminary site plan application, which has not been accepted yet, has not been made final, but soon will be later this year, is the Melwood application on 23rd Street. So this is kind of a snapshot of what's approved, what's in the review, what's coming up on the horizon that we're tracking. In terms of schedules, when we look at kind of next few weeks, next few months, we just concluded the online engagement for River House. So that was about a 10-day, 14-day window. Staff is reviewing a lot of feedback. We've gotten tons of comments. And once those are synthesized and we have a chance to regroup with the Site Plan Review Committee chair, we'll start to look at some dates, likely in late October, to begin the Site Plan Review Committee meetings, which will likely take us well into the winter and spring. Separate from that, the Crystal City Block Plan W, 2525 Crystal Drive, that one is anticipated to reach the board this fall. We don't have a specific month identified just yet, but any day now, any week, I think that should be finalized. And then finally, the Crystal Plaza Apartments is currently on hold. We're waiting to see when we can proceed with that one and begin SPRC. So we'll follow up once we have more details. And then if you look at this presentation later, the other thing that we tend to track is also once things are approved, what did they deliver? This is regardless of whether that's been constructed or not, but some people like to kind of tally up the totals. So this gives you a sense of what has been approved with those various projects. It does, however, exclude those phase development site plans, which again are more of a framework and not actual projects for us to track. So once those individual site plans come in, we'll start adding them to this table. So I'll pause there and maybe go back to this slide and see if there's any questions. And if you do, it might take a second. I want to make sure you grab the microphone so others can hear us. And this is already online, so if anybody wants to get a copy, get it available. All right. The Crystal Pentagon Cities Council has a dedicated page, and then we just track by meeting. So, all right, I will stop sharing, and then if there's no comments on that one, I believe the next item are the transportation updates, and we have 2 county staff with us to cover those. So, Ariel, Jason, I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Good evening. I'm Ariel Yang. I work on the capital projects team. Jason Wistrom on the call here. He's my supervisor. He has a conflict right now. He's actually presently at a separate public meeting, in-person meeting. So I'll be giving the presentation tonight. Can you hear me all right? I hope so.
Yep, you're good.
Okay, good. Let me share my screen. All right, and presentation mode. All right, so yeah, I'm not sure. So this is the, this is just the introduction page. This page, I'm not sure how familiar you all are with the kind of the capital projects map on the county website. If you're not familiar with it, don't know where it's located, you can go on the county.
Switch the presenter view.
Hey, Ariel, I'm sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. Can you adjust the same way I just did to kind of maximize? There we go. I think if you
Okay.
hide the presenter view, that's the quickest way to do it. There might be like that 3-dot button.
Hang on a second, okay?
Yep. So below the slide,
Okay, so wait. Below the slide, yeah. Oh, okay.
you might have to go back to presenting.
Okay, hang on a second. My bad. Uh, Sorry about that. So below, are you seeing, actually, I think I might be sharing the wrong screen. So hang on a second.
Yeah, I think you're just sharing the wrong.
Yeah, thank you. Um,
I think if you do share and then go right to the file itself rather than the screen.
okay. So I'll share. Hang on a second. I think what I need to do is this.
I think even if
And
you
while
had
she's-
the last one, we might be able to work with the buttons that are there. If you can bring that
Okay.
back up.
Okay, hang on a
and while
second, all right.
she's doing that, are you saying that the last one you showed you shared through the PowerPoint Live option? Or was it just a regular shares?
So let me share that screen and then do the dot, dot, dot.
All right.
And
That did it.
We can see it now.
you can see it now?
Yeah,
Okay, is it pretty clear?
very.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
You're good.
All right. So here's what we have going on. Upcoming projects that are in design and engagement opportunities with those projects and ongoing construction projects. And at the end, I can take questions. So here we go. The first one we have in design, and these are in no particular order. I just kind of grouped them from 15th Street. So 15th Street from South Joyce to South Hayes, this project will enhance access and safety for persons with disabilities in the public right-of-way. The project is currently in 90% resubmission, and the county project team is coordinating with TNO for a signal upgrade at the mall garage entrance. Next one, 15th Street on the east side of Richmond Highway from South Clark to Bell realignment to Crystal Drive. This project is almost at the end of the design phase. We are awaiting VDOT permit approvals, and it is anticipated to go out to bid in soon. And we expect contract award in late this year or early 2025. This one, 18th Street South realignment from Clark Bell to Crystal Drive. This one will provide new sidewalk and streetscape, as well as upgrade to the bike network. The project is adjacent to a new park project and the Crystal City East Entrance project. So there's a lot of coordination going on. The team is working on 30% resubmittal. Right. Long Bridge Drive Multimodal Connection Project is currently in concept design phase. There is a online engagement forum that's open right now. And on Thursday this week, so in 2 days, there will be an in-person public engagement opportunity at Long Bridge Aquatic Center. The time will be from 5 to 7:30. Next one, Army-Navy Drive protected bike lane missing link. This one will extend the two-way cycle track from the Army-Navy Drive Complete Streets project that's currently under construction to the Army-Navy Country Club access road. It is in final design. Oh, actually, the final design is completed and construction is anticipated to start in summer 2025. Arlington View Connector Trail. This was formerly called the Army-Navy Country Club Trail, but we named it to properly reflect what the project will do, which is to connect the Arlington View and Arlington Ridge neighborhoods to Pentagon City and Crystal City. The trail will begin at 13th Row at Hoffman Boston Elementary School, and it will kind of run alongside 395 and then beneath 395 overpass to connect to the Army Navy Drive PBL, the Protected Bike Lane missing link project, which is the one that I talked about in the previous slide. This project is in 60% design, and construction is slated for 2026. I'm sure many of you are familiar with CC to DCA, Crystal City to DCA project. We completed the NEPA phase this summer, and the project team has begun 15% preliminary engineering. There will be a public engagement opportunity sometime late this year or early next year. So be on the lookout for that. This project and next slide are transit projects. This one is the Transitway extension to Pentagon City. Segment 2A, ITB, invitation to bid, is ongoing. So we're very close to getting that contractor. The construction is slated to begin in January or February next year. Segment 2B is still in concept design. All right. So now we're going into construction projects, ongoing construction projects. This one, I'm sure many of you are familiar with as well. Boundary Channel Drive interchange is complete. We just wanted to kind of give a brief update. We are aware of trees and some planting issues, and we're addressing that. We're also working with VDOT on potential improvements at the intersection with the Aquatic Center. So it's substantially complete, but we're working out a few kinks. 18th Street South Complete Streets project from Southeast to South Fern is also complete. We're working with the contractor on a few punch list or repair items. 15th Street and South Fern Street intersection improvement. This one was just completed last month. You could see in street view too, or on live traffic camera, all the bike lanes and markings are all painted and marked. Now, soon under construction, we'll have very, very soon the 23rd Street mid-block crossing. Construction hours will be limited to 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Southeast Street Phase 1. This one is currently under construction with the adjacent New Park project. The contractor has started working on streetlight conduits and curb and gutter work from 11th Street to 12th Street, so the second block of the project. Next one is Southeast Phase 2. This project is from 12th Street to 15th Street. Construction is also active, and the contractor has started working from 15th Street, the south end of the project, and it's working its way north towards 12th Street to avoid conflict with Clark Construction. They're currently doing work for Penn Place. Next one is Army Navy Drive Complete Streets project. This one is currently in Phase 2A and 2B work, and that includes installation of new sidewalk, curb, gutter, stormwater, and the two-way cycle track along the south side of the street. Pentagon City Metro second elevator. It is very near substantial completion. We're thinking by the end of 2014, this year, we should be there. The entrance should be open. The station entrance the elevator should be open. All right, so Crystal City Metro Station East entrance will begin excavation soon with the final design complete by February 2025. The station entrance itself is slated to open in 2027. Right. And here's a list of completed projects in the area. I'm sure you probably have seen some of this in the past, and these have all been completed. And this is a slide of upcoming engagements, most notably Long Bridge Drive Multimodal Connection. The in-person engagement meeting is this Thursday. And also be on the lookout for the update to Master Transportation Plan. There will be a process kickoff meeting sometime in the fall this year. And to stay updated, please sign up for the Crystal City, Pentagon City Transportation Update newsletter. Right. I can take any questions if anyone has anything.
All right. So we're going to give us a second. We're going to rely on some microphones that are spread out here, and then let us know if you can hear it. If not, I'll just repeat the question.
Yes, hopefully you can hear this. This is Ben Johnson. I have a couple of questions. For the very first one that you had for the along 15th between Faith and Joyce, did you I don't know, go back to, I think I missed that, about basically whether there was any discussion with the property owner there about improving or longer term improvements. I know that was potentially slated for like maybe a complete streets that was taken off or something like that. And you kind of label it as an ADA accessibility project. I think the sector plan envisions some much better changes there. It's just a pretty awful intersection of the mall exit, and they no sidewalk and people walking through the side on the street to Pentagon Row, I guess and what the changes look like, and if they preclude potential longer term changes. And my second question was about the 18th Street project, and whether or not that'll lead to closure of sidewalks on both sides of the street in Crystal City, or if that's going to be staggered and coordinated with the other construction with the metro station entrance.
Were you guys able to hear that?
Not too clearly. I think there were multiple questions about multiple projects, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Hello, everybody. This is Jason Widstrom. I think the first question was in relation to 15th Street that you have on the screen.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm not sure if the person who asked the question has seen any of the proposed plans, but I know there was initially ideas to, I would say, take a larger approach to the changes being made out there, but ultimately, as part of the budget process, it was trimmed down to some degree. I can tell you what we are proposing to do is to eliminate that turn lane as you're coming, I guess, westbound or northbound along 15th Street as it approaches the mall entrance. That turn lane will go away. The curb will move inward, I believe, or it'll be striped out. And then we are working with the mall to basically reorganize the space in front where you enter and exit to give pedestrians a much shorter crossing distance, as well as a larger space for refuge. And then we'll also be upgrading the ramps as they cross over 15th, or I guess Joyce at that point, as well as refurbishing all of the signal equipment that's old out there. That's about what we could get in scope with the allowable budget, and without really getting a lot of land or rights to it from the property owners there. They're actually a little less than thrilled with some of the changes, but I think we've made a pretty good, I think, compromise in that way.
Yeah, thank you. Did you coordinate with Federal Realty I don't know if you can, the Federal Realty about West Coast access and that exit road. That access road.
The Federal Realty, they're the ones to the left of the mall, right?
Yes, there's a access road that easily become one way, in my opinion.
Yeah, we have coordinated with them in the past. On Army Navy Drive, we eliminated a turn in, and now you have to do a U-turn on Army Navy Drive at Joyce to be able to get into the Harris Teeter parking lot. And so as we approach this one, it's my understanding from the PM that they did not want much change in this location. So again, what we've tried to do is widen the refuges and shorten the crossing distance.
Thank you. I'd also asked about the 18th Street and construction, if sidewalks will be closed on both sides in Crystal City.
So with 18th Street, we're very early in the design process. We are actually working on the concept or towards a 30%. And with that, really what we're looking at is like, what is the cross section going to look like, and how will that interact or interface with the new entrance to the metro as well as the park. So we're very early in on the process. I can say in general, when it comes to MOTs between different projects, we do have plans in place. We try to always keep a path open for pedestrian and bike traffic, always. There are times, and again, in general, and in transportation projects where maybe a road closure or a closure could accelerate construction significantly, where the pain is worth, the closure. But I would say at this time we're too early, but given that location and the real need for pedestrian mobility and bike mobility, I can't see a reason why we would close any of that.
This is Rob Bandel with the National Energy Bid. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, I see you're on the call, but the south side of 18th Street there was already built out, part of the project. I don't think there's any work happening on the south side. It's just on the north side. So I don't think there's any closure on the south side.
Yes, that's correct. That curb is to remain. We're not proposing to change any of that.
Sure whether it's possible, but it would be nice if the different improvement projects coordinate. Because, for example, when they are working on the 13th Street and continuation all the way, that's when I'm driving to the Long Bridge to go swimming, then you couldn't turn, you couldn't go straight. You had to turn right on Southeast. Then I tried to go around 18th, which was blocked because of the new metro entrance. Some kind of detouring or advice to people would be very nice. So would it be possible to coordinate these different projects? And because there are crews with signs, etc., I saw a truck, signs, blah, 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 but there were no signs to direct traffic. So would it be possible, or whose responsibility is it?
It is something that we do take a look at through the approval process of whether it be our own capital projects or commercial plans and the implementation of those. If you do have a specific question or issues, certainly you can send it to us today, and I'll take what your comments are today back. But anytime that you come across something that isn't working right, certainly let us know. We don't have the staff to be out there every day to check on MOTs, and contractors do have a way of migrating some of their MOT. And we need to come back and rethink how we've done it as well. So certainly anytime that you see that, let us know.
Any other questions?
Just looking for any other questions, but I think that might be it.
One question.
Oh, one more, hold on.
Hi, this is Mike Della. And question on the 15th Street by the mall, the signalization that you're updating, will that be sensor based so that the light is responsive to the traffic, particularly coming out of the mall?
I don't know. I don't know the specifics, but I do believe that in most cases we are putting back the sensors or cameras is what it is. That is the way to go. The loops in the ground that use basically magnetic resistance are an older technology that need to be replaced with some frequency, especially when you have to repave. So I would suspect it would be camera based, but that would be something I'd have to confirm with the Signals team.
Thank you.
I think that does it for questions. So thank you guys again for presenting. And we got this posted online. So great opportunity for that pretty robust update. So thank you.
Mhm.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And I think we're ready for the 23rd Street parking study presentation.
All right, great. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for the opportunity to present on the update for the 23rd Street South parking study. Last time I presented, we were just about wrapping up. So here I'll present some of the same information I presented last time, but it would include some of the findings as well as recommendations. So just quickly, the agenda for today, we'll talk about the background again. What was the impetus for the study? Overview of the scope of work. We'll talk about data collection in terms of the methodologies that were used, the major findings from that data collection, summarize the results, and then we'll just talk about the recommendations that were posed by the consultants, and then we can go into questions. So starting from the background of the study, so the impetus for this was that we know that the 23rd Street corridor has always reported issues from both businesses, individuals, as well as residents of the community in terms of parking access. The first study of its nature specifically related to that corridor was conducted in 2005 by the University of Maryland. In terms of their methodology, the first was just assessing supply and demand. In terms of their findings, they found that the occupancy for public and private parking, there was a differential between there, and their recommendations was to improve and manage parking supply, and the idea of shuttle or satellite parking was proposed. Jumping forward to 2019, a parking occupancy study was conducted, and this was using camera analysis, looking at different types of on-street regulations. So that included metered, residential permit parking, time limited. So this is time limited parking, but unpaid, and then just general unmanaged. In terms of just looking at particularly for the corridor and the 23rd Street area, there were data collected weekday and weekend, 8 a.m., 12 p.m., 4 p.m., 8 p.m., and 10 p.m. The highest occupancy recorded at that time was the weekend at 10 p.m. And then jumping to 2022, another data collection effort was conducted, primarily focusing on the residential permit parking in the Aurora Highlands area. Similar methodology was undertaken for weekday and weekend, but this was every 3 hours as compared to every 4, including 8 a.m., 11 p.m., 2 p.m., and 5 p.m. Even though the previous record was still there for highest occupancy on the weekend at 10 p.m., it was still the weekend, but then the highest occupancy was at 5 p.m. But specifically for this study, knowing the history of the area having issues with parking or parking availability, access, and demand, the county committee is conducting a curve-based study, and this was tied to site plan 451, which was approved in December 2019, and then requests for proposals were issued in March 2022. So now that we jump to 2024, as a part of that commitment the county made, the scope of work related to the 23rd Street study had three primary objectives. The first was to gain an understanding of current parking utilizations in the area. The second was identify potential discrepancy between needs and management approaches, as well as develop strategies to optimize the curb space and asset utilization or allocation and regulation. And lastly, collaborate with the business to enhance parking availability. And they were the target audience, as based on the previous data, as well as contacts with the community. The business community have been the loudest and most vocal in terms of the impacts and changes related to parking. So in terms of the scope of work, it's broken down into three main areas: parking utilization, business survey, and study analysis. So if you look at the graphic here, it just shows the study area. So to the north, we have the Crystal Houses apartments. To the west, we have Aurora Highland neighborhoods, and then to the east, we have the Crystal City neighborhood. And all of these were taken into account into the study, but the focus area were the red boundary areas here. So into the first task related to the scope of work, parking utilization, that includes the inventory and assessment of existing infrastructure. So that includes parking spaces all the way to scooters, transit stop, just to see what other transportation access options were available. In terms of parking activity analysis, this includes occupancy and dwell time. So this was collected both using data from the performance parking pilot. So data was captured from November 1st, 2023 to May 12th, 2024. But then we also conducted studies related to the RPP restricted facilities using the same camera analysis that the 2019 and 2022 study did previously. And that included December of last year, March, and then of May of this year. In terms of the business surveys, the first phase was the initial surveys with the business owner managers. So they were the target audience. This was an in-person survey, and the content we really focused on various aspects of business operations, including parking and mobility challenges. So this was an attempt to get the business perspective in terms of parking availability, supply, demand, and area. Phase two was targeted primarily at the patrons and employees. This was also done in person, so it was conducted in two periods. First was January 10th, and then the second was between March, sorry, apologies. The second was March 18th, and then the open survey was available between 18th and 31st. So both are 1 days of in-person, but then we did let the patron survey be available via QR code and online as well to the end. And this survey, again, focused on various individual parking behaviors, but it was targeted at, again, employees and patrons. And then lastly, in terms of the scope of work, it was just summarizing all the data for the data collection from the parking utilization, as well as the survey collection, and provide recommendations. So jumping back to data collection, this included, again, existing conditions of parking inventory. So starting with parking inventory on the 23rd Street South on the north side, this is a metered facility with 2-hour limit that has a capacity of 14 vehicles. On the south side, this is also 2-hour limit and had 11 vehicles. But near the end of the study, as many of those who are familiar with the area, there was a mid-block crossing that was installed, which is currently temporary and should be installed permanently, which impacted the parking inventory, which I believe took away about 2 to 3 spaces. So that doesn't impact the analysis. Then looking to the north on the 22nd Street, 22nd Street South on the north side, there's a capacity of 16 vehicles, and then on the south side, 9 vehicles. And then when we look at off-street parking, both public and private, in terms of public, you have the surface lot, the 22nd Street lot, or the southeast surface lot, with a capacity of 95 vehicles. And then when we look at South Fern Street in terms of RPP, that has a capacity of 3 vehicles, but it was something that was noted as a part of the study area. And then in terms of private off-street parking, it was identified about 136 designated spaces, whereas about 31 of those spaces were no longer in use because of permanently closed facilities. And then on the south side of that, of the lot there was a capacity of 9 vehicles. So again, this is just to show you the different inventory, but we'll go specifically within those areas in terms of how occupancy was in. So looking at the 23rd Street South north side, so again, just looking at the map, I'll just jump back quickly here. So that's where we have Restaurant Row. So just looking at the north side there, the results from the performance parking data is what we expect. It's high occupancy. So on the y-axis is the occupancy. So 100% means that it's fully occupied. 0 means that there's 100% availability, and we have it from 12 a.m. to midnight. So we, in terms of meter hours, which are the most important hours, which are 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., we do see the slow increase in terms of occupancy, but that it stays pretty occupied throughout the day. And we note, similar to the previous studies, that for the Saturday and Sundays, the weekends, it pretty much stays fully occupied from 10 a.m. till the next day till midnight. So that's pretty simple, and that is what is reported by the community and has. When we look at the 23rd South Side, similar pattern, but just a little less so. Interestingly enough, when we look at 22nd Street, which is just one block over, we see that it doesn't meet 100% capacity at any time. Majority of the time, it's at 80% capacity. And then, interestingly enough, just on the north side, we see between 2 p.m. and like 6 p.m., it's a dramatic decrease where the availability increases about 60%. So again, a pattern that we notice, and this can inform certain type of recommendations, as we'll see later on. And then when we look at the south side, similar pattern. So when you look at 23rd Street and 22nd Street, you can see the north and south exhibit similar patterns for some reason, but it's mostly because they're going west, and there's probably traffic from that side that has high occupancy, and those are the areas that are parked more. But then when we look on the south side, similar patterns, but less so. But again, here the highest occupancy that are absorbed there is about 80%. And then again, we see similar dips between that, like 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. And that could be attributed to multiple things. It could be, the change in the lunch shift going from the 12 to that shift changeover for the evening rush or dinner rush. It could also be due to a lot of construction in the area, and then the vehicles that do arrive, they arrive much earlier, around 7, and then at 3 p.m. But those are just anecdotal. And then looking at the South Street lot, which again has the most capacity in the area, the highest occupancy that we know at any period of time, over again from November of last year to May of this year, is 70%. And also we see the same type of pattern dip. And again, this is evidence to show that behavior in terms of Orange Street for Orange Street is as what we know it to be, where the attraction is for Orange Street as compared to Orange Street Park. And then quickly, just for the RPP, because we know that this is specific spaces that are designated for use and are purposely so, but we wanted to examine how they're being used currently today. And you can see for a lot of those, even though it's 3 vehicles, they're above 100% capacity. Because the way that we do the spacing, we say an individual space, if it's RC, is about 20 feet. So when it's over 100%, it means that they were able to fit in vehicle. So instead of 3 vehicles, it was probably observed that there were 4 or 5 vehicles that were able to fit in that 3 vehicle space. All right, great. So just talking about the findings for the data collection. So facilities on 23rd Street and restricted on South Street, so we're near full capacity. So they were almost near 100% throughout the duration of the time. However, notably, there was lower occupancy on 23rd Street start, as well as on the southeast lots, where the maximum recorded average was 66% in terms of occupancy. So you can say the difference of that, or the inverse in terms of availability, was about 34%, or sorry, 34% availability of spaces at that. And then in terms of average dwell time, that ranged from 22 to 48 minutes on the meter spaces. So even though those are 2-hour limits, we note that people are spending less than 2 hours in those times. Then on the north side facility, which is 12-hour limit, the average dwell time is about 87 to 121 minutes. So that's about 2 hours. Whereas on the service lot, which is a 4-hour limit, those actually have higher heights. So interesting enough, on the higher limit, which is 12-hour, there's less average dwell time. Whereas on the ones that has a lower limit, 4 hours is a higher dwell time. So interesting enough, the spaces that can be used longer are actually being used less. And then looking at the survey responses, as we said, we did the surveys for the businesses as well as patrons and owners. So it was just some major highlights. 11 out of the 15 respondents, there were a total of 19 owners that were interviewed, or businesses, but not all of the response. We did not receive response from all of them in terms of specific questions. So 11 out of the 50 respondents shared concerns regarding the availability of parking, while 4 out of 50 had no concern. In terms of some notable remarks, there was complaints or reports that patrons were going elsewhere due to a lack of parking. That was 4 respondents. Occupied that the spaces that were designated parking were occupied employees or patrons of other businesses rather than the business that it should be assigned to. There was a perception that RPP parking to the west is underutilized. There was an existing metered surface lot is only reliable parking area for customers, and that other parking garages are too far away. And then lastly, that the Chris Isles development will create additional. So in terms of the sequencing of the presentation, I intentionally did put these comments at the end based on showing that the data-driven problem, not to invalidate the comments, but just so that there is a disconnect between perception and reality, primarily when it comes to underutilized. So in our opinion, it was the metric that we use, that if there's 80% occupancy, that's a space or area that's, pretty much occupied. Anything lower than 40%, we'll say that there's probably pretty low demand and we would want to incentivize. So at that, I think being in the 40 and 80% range, which the lot is being 66% occupied, does show that there is demand, but there may be the perception that there's more demand than there actually is. In terms of the patron responses, majority of responses that we received were via the county website. Again, we did have 1 day or 2 days of in person, but we did want to extend out and give the opportunity for those who didn't involve, who weren't be able to be interacted on street or chose not to at that time, still provide the responses. In addition to the county website responses, it should be noted the majority of those responses, those people did report walking or living in there. Whereas with the other responses, we did have those who were visiting. So looking at trip purpose for the areas in red, spin for you all. So this is parking sentiment. So this includes all sentiment across the user type, which includes in-person as well as online responses. So in terms of the total responses, I would say about 50%. So there's a total of 94 responses are negative. In terms of business employees, which is a smaller portion in terms of count, it was about 75% negative. In terms of residents, about 50% negative. Business patrons. So if we just look at just based on user type, the negative sentiment overall is by employees. And that can mostly be attributed to the type of parking available. So if you're an employee working at a restaurant, the type of parking that's in the area may not be suitable where you're paying for 2-hour, 4-hour meeting, but your shift is maybe 10, 12 hours or 8 hours. So I think that's something that we definitely noted within the responses, that the negative sentiment is primarily among. In terms of travel mode by visit purpose, I'll zoom this in again for you to see. For all, about 50% is car. For businesses, about 50%, or business employees, 50% has been car as well. For those for residential, again, it's about the inverse, where about 50% walk. So parking really isn't that much an issue. But for business patrons, again, 50%. So the main thing to note here is that when it comes to how people travel to the area, a large amount of them do walk or either. Then when we look at visit by purpose, and it should be noted that many respondents did not provide an answer, but when looking at how people parked, a large majority did street parking. When you're looking at business employees, a lot of them utilize the surface lot for their parking needs. When it comes to residents, again, a large part didn't reply, but they either use a lot street parking, and similarly for residents, or sorry, for business. Okay, almost towards the end here. So so just in summary, for the business owners along Westfield Road, they did have and continue to express longstanding concerns about parking availability for the employees and patrons. And I think primarily it's not necessarily the current parking, because we have done a lot of adjustments. I think it relates to the performance parking program, being able to provide real-time occupancy of the surface lot and on street in that area has improved parking availability. But I think the main concern is about the near future or long-term future in terms of Crystal House's development. Again, during the peak periods, the study found that parking occupancy on 23rd Street South and South Front is near or exceeding capacity. But then when we look at parking along 22nd Street, particularly the surface lot, they were not. And then most of the survey-based Stones employees and patrons felt negatively about parking availability. So there is that disconnect between perception of parking availability and actuality, and the real question is how can we link the two and really provide more adequate information about what parking is available. And with that, the study team developed a list of recommendations to address these concerns. And with that, I will list these recommendations. I do want to note that these recommendations were developed by the consultant independently of the county, but the idea was to provide recommendations that we could take under consideration and implement. So right now, the study, as well as the presentation, or the presentation that the consultant has provided us, is online. And that includes a lot more detail than I provided at the moment, as well as the report, but just wanted to provide that as a point of reference. So in terms of recommendations, they're categorized in 4 areas. So time limitations, management type hours and metered rates, and then some other recommendations that can be implemented. So in terms of time limitations, some of the proposed recommendations include reducing the time limitation on the 22nd Street and the 23rd Street South, because again, we see that there is 12-hour parking, but the majority of the dwell times is 2 to 4 hours. And then when we look at the 2-hour parking area, the primary of the duration is 1 hour. And the intent by this, it would be that by lowering the time limit, it would increase turnover. Turnover typically is an indicator of economic. So you're allowing someone else to be able to use that. In terms of management type and hours, outreach to adjacent communities on the current occurrence of existing or changes to RPP hours. We do have an internal process in terms of how RPP is reviewed, but this is something that is a community effort and it requires community involvement. And knowing that for the RPP areas in this area, particularly within the study area, was just 3 spaces, but there may be other areas outside of the study area that are adjacent that RPP that may be experiencing different demand time. But again, just a recommendation of specifically allowing meter 2 parking during the midday peak on weekdays, which we observed that that's the biggest demand, and extending metered hours to cover 8 p.m. through midnight, just so that allows, because the demand is there, but then without being paid parking, it kind of induces demand, and then you have that demand. In terms of metered rates, increasing rates on 23rd Street South to reduce rates on 22nd Street South. And this is something that we're doing today based on the performance parking. Previously, we did not do changes in the Richmond Highway corridor. We just implemented our third price change on Monday. And for the last 2, we did not do any changes, but this will be the first change. So we'll see how that has impacted or will impact behavior. And lastly, in terms of other recommendations, coordinating with property owners to encourage leasing of private parking spaces. As the study found, there was about 136 parking spaces that are private parking, and about 31 are not being utilized because there isn't a business assigned to those spaces. So it's something that can be explored, and it aligns with the Arlington County's commercial market resiliency initiative. And there was a new board action that was passed, I believe, at the end of last year in terms of shared parking and about providing more parking access to the community. And then lastly, it's enhanced guide signage, publication, promotion, wayfinding, anything to allow people to look at alternative transportation options. But then if they do decide to drive, ensure that they have the information in terms of locating a meeting space when it's available, as well as off-site parking. With that, I'll open it up to questions. And you can look at the website for more information by scanning the QR code, as well as reach out to our other team members for media parts. Thank you.
Thank you for that. All right, we got some questions. There's a microphone right there. Start passing it around.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi. I'm Kim Van Ryn. I'm one of the Aurora Highlands representatives. And thank you for your wonderful reports online. They're terrific and a huge amount of information. And thank you for your presentation. there were additional recommendations in reports that you didn't mention. And two of them I think we'll want to discuss. The one was something about outreach to the Aurora Highlands community to see if we could vary the RPP hours so that people could use the slots for lunch and putting meters in. And the other was a recommendation to encourage not driving and alternative forms of transportation. And when I saw the I saw the not driving one, I thought, yeah, that's great, we should do that. That takes a lot of work because it's hard to get from 23rd to say the metro, it's not that close. For the putting in meters where we have parking in front of our houses. When I saw that, I noted that to our City Association President, Rachel Mix, and I said, what do you think our residents would think about this? And she said, well, given the history, no, there would be a lot of pushback on that. So I agree with that. And could you discuss both of those points, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, and thank you again for your comments. In terms of the management types, that's where I talked about the RPP potential changes. And again, I do want to note that this was developed by our consultant, and the request that was given to them was to, provide any and all recommendations to improve. In terms of the job that we have to do as a county, as that county, is to assess all of those for feasibility. And again, we do have an RPP process that's vetted and in place and a part of the ordinance. So any change would have to adhere to that process. So I definitely hear you loud and clear in terms of the impact, but it was something that was just presented as a part of the scope of recommendations that we can consider, but we're still assessing those things.
And what about encouraging non-driving to get to the restaurants? And one reason I raised it to Rachel was that it was in both reports. I know the one was the consultant report, but the other was, a county report. So I assumed it was somewhat county supported. Thank you.
Yes, in terms of that, there hasn't been much in terms, if you're specifically talking about in the 2005 report about shuttle services and that option, there hasn't been a resurgency about that. But again, it is referenced in this report, and we are taking that as a part of and it has been noted by others as one of the pain points, where even though there is a lot of parking that may be available east of Richmond Highway, being able to cross or having to cross from Richmond Highway, and a lot of apartments even near to Crystal Drive. So going from Crystal Drive to Richmond Highway to 23rd Street can be a long walk, and looking at alternate ways to connect the need between the demand for parking with the destination being a little bit further away. So again, all on the table, but has to go through the vetting process, and anything would require sign off from the community, from the board, as well when it comes to things that are into the ordinance, such as.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, this is Ben Devonza, also Aurora Highlands. I want to kind of express a little, it's disappointing that the county is not strongly considering other forms of transportation encouragement, given the county's other approaches to transportation. So I'll use, for example, traveling there from the Crystal City Metro, which is a 10-minute walk, that's half a mile. But, and you mentioned crossing Route 1, you don't need to cross Route 1 currently to get to 23rd Street. In the future, you will, because of the bringing Route 1 to grade project. And there are proposals to make it harder to get from Crystal City Metro to 23rd Street Western Row. So I think you urge you to consider that. But also there are ways like 23rd Street Restaurant Row and Crystal City and the Metro are very different visually, and there's no wayfinding. And so considering putting in potential wayfinding, putting in a better bus infrastructure, that sidewalk is very narrow, doesn't feel comfortable, but we are going to see some improvements to the Crystal House infill projects. But given that, the county is looking at GDM measures around Route 1 and other projects, and is looking towards encouraging alternative forms of transportation. I understand that the restaurant owners very much think, not incorrectly, that parking is going to be the easiest way, but given the direction I think the county is moving in, the county should really be investing in making it easier to get to 23rd Street. I live about a 10-minute walk away from 23rd Street, Restaurant Row, and yeah, walking there sometimes can feel uncomfortable. And the county, I think the restaurants would really benefit from making those connections feel better for pedestrians, bikers, and transit users.
Well, Ben, I really appreciate your comment. And even though I'm in parking, we have socialized and continue to socialize the study results. So I would defer to my colleagues in DS Transit, and I have worked with them as well. And I know there's a lot of transit improvements that are implemented that are in the area, especially along South Bell and 12th Street. And there are a lot of changes that'll be happening forthcoming. So the hope is that this will be a collaborative effort for improvements. So I haven't noted in the slide, but in terms of next steps, we plan to have our internal group of our operations folks, enforcement, transit, capital improvement, those who have invested in the areas to look at the recommendations, but also we're giving it period of time to assess other feedback. So right now, the best means is to provide feedback for me through the website by email. But we're hoping that people will, digest the information in the study, give some time to ask questions, and then we would move forward with any short-term implementation. But again, a lot of the changes that will happen in the near or short-term or long-term future will have to be assessed as changes are ongoing. I think the intent is really to look at what we can do now, because it is a pain point now, but noting that there will be continued changes.
Yes, and I'm going to the city. I was looking at the report before coming here, and I was surprised that you lumped together the patrons and employees, because their parking needs are very different. So I wonder whether if you tease them apart, you would have a very different situation, and also very different recommendations as far as how to fix the parking.
So we did, and apologies if it made it seem as if they were grouped together. We did have them all collected as total responses, but we did separate them out from business employees, residents, which were the patrons, and then business patrons themselves. So they're all separated out. But let me clarify what those are. So let's go back. So for the business employees, those were individuals that work for the 15 businesses that were identified.
Perception, how they really view the parking situation. I think you have them lumped together. But doesn't matter. A very simple suggestion I would have, that the restaurants should have on their websites suggestions for parking, because maybe people are not aware of the available parking on the 22nd Street. And, lots of businesses do that they recommend where to park or how to park. Take the Uber, People sometimes need a
No, I agree.
suggestion.
I agree. And I think a part of it is making it easier on the restaurant. So right now we are developing collateral and copy so that it can be easier to insert on the websites related to parking access. So again, one of those is the performance parking pilot, which you can access the availability information right now on the Park Mobile app, as well as the ExactNav app, as well as dashboards that are available. But to your point, I think it's about making these tools more accessible to the restaurants and having them be able to access.
Hi, Stacy Breyer from Inner Highlands. Several questions. One, I wasn't sure if you had done part of the study on these private lots, like Portofino lot and Birkenherbert, because those are pretty packed usually, and then that's just an intuitive assessment of it. So that's just maybe an observation. Second question. really the main question is, this is like a great snapshot in time, right? But there's just so much going on in the area that how can it be possible to do something that's not having in consideration all of these development plans that are happening in the area. So, and I'm just, there's a beer garden coming in, there's Melwood, there's the Crystal House, they underparked a lot of the 2 and 3 bedroom apartments because they were affordable. We noted that in the Civic Association comments, and nothing really ever happened to that. The development lot is going away, there's 95 spaces. The beer garden's gonna take up some spots. And I guess, those are just some examples, but back in the day, it used to have, every restaurant had to have a number of parking spaces, and it was just a matter of math for them to be able to do business. So whatever happened to that math? Why don't they have required just to have the parking? Because I know from being in retail development that parking is a real, at least it used to be, a very important part of the success of their business. And, not having parking, the people go somewhere else because they can't have parking. So lots of issues here. I mean, I had so many questions, but it seems, I guess, maybe in summary that like, what happened to the old way of like just making sure that there was planning for parking over a long term, and that people have the metrics that we all know about for parking that they should have perceived. So I'll just stop with that. Unless you answer, appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I thank you for your comments. I think the best way for me to answer is to speak from a professional perspective. I have a doctorate in transportation engineering. I could talk about the industry shift, and then I could talk personally from the 23rd Street and Arlington County perspective. So in terms of the industry, there has been a shift from parking maximums and minimums just to be parking by use. I believe with the commercial market resiliency initiative, there have been pushes towards that direction. In terms of how we've been parking certain use types, a lot of it is just based on available data. One of the resources that we use is the Institute of Transportation Engineers data table that's reported data from around the country for urban, suburban, and rural areas for certain use types and the parking demand for there. But a lot of that information is dated, and I could say that the information, and I'm sure my traffic engineers or signal folks could even look at usage patterns. All of that has changed. We no longer see the typical 8 a.m. p.m. peaks. We're seeing all types of behavior patterns are changing, especially when it comes to the Friday and Monday versus the weekday. So I think for all of us in the transportation industry, we are adjusting to that. And I think there's a shift in how we incorporate that. So that's just my professional perspective. In terms of specifically for the Arlington County area, I think that we're in a position that we haven't been anywhere in the country that I know of where we do have real-time data of parking behavior. I think in terms of the equation of supply and demand, we typically know what the supply is in terms of parking. The parking space typically doesn't change or move, but we know that that does happen with the development change. But we never really had the sense of demand. It was just typically when someone would go out there, they would say, I saw a parking space that was occupied and I don't have parking. But now that we have the data, and again, I do want to note that this isn't over a full year, but it captures at least 8 months going from November to May. So it captures a lot of time and it's a lot of data over multiple days, but it shows an inherent pattern in the behavior. So I don't want to discount that in terms of how we incorporate that into moving forward. And then the last comment I would just say in terms of the site plan process, I am aware of the Bear Garden, I'm aware of the Crystal House development. I'm the parking reviewer assigned to both of those since I have been doing the 23rd Street South study. And I know it's an ongoing negotiation. It's folks like yourselves, members of the community, county staff, CHPD, DS negotiating, talking with the developers to find a way to make all parties happy, which can be hard, but it's the nature of the business. I know that in terms of parking demand and how it's being analyzed and treated, there is a shift because of the hybrid work environment. We're not seeing the same pattern. So the short of it, I do think all of those are important issues, and we are trying to tackle them all at once, but it requires collaborative.
So just to follow up on maybe the biggest part of that question, that lot's going away in the county plans, that those 95 spaces and the beer gardens coming in. So let's talk about that. I mean, how does that get like calculated in there? I mean, if 95 goes away, more people are showing up. Hopefully they're not driving, but they might be.
Okay, also,
Yeah.
Guys, we're gonna start running short of time, so let's
Yeah,
gotta make this work, okay?
big issues for this side of the room.
No, I agree, and I'm more than willing to talk more about it. I would definitely defer you to my colleague Kristen Mostis in CPHD, who has been coordinating a lot of that effort. But it is my understanding that the 95 spaces will go away short term. There will be probably, and again, don't hold me to these timeline in 2027. There'll be a portion of those spaces that'll be allocated to the displacement of those in Crystal houses, and then eventually the entire lot will be. But I know for Crystal houses, there are spaces that will be assigned for retail uses, but those will be underground or off-street parking.
Very much. Oh, there's no fun.
Yep, it's definitely off. It's on now. My name is Meg Flores. I live in Crystal Towers. I'm also a member of the Transportation Commission, as well as a member of CPCC. I just want to reiterate Ben's suggestion from earlier of wayfinding. The three goals that I tend to align most with in the transportation master plan are to move more people without traffic and to promote safety and establish equity. And I may have missed this in the presentation, but is there a strategy to implement wayfinding from as we see changes to the Crystal City Metro Station towards the 23rd Street Restaurant District?
That's a good question. I cannot speak to that specifically, but I can follow up on that with my transit colleagues that are leading the staff.
Okay,
But I
thank
think
you
it
very
makes
much.
it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you. Do we have
You're
time
welcome.
for more? Mine was quick.
Yeah, we can do one more, but
Okay.
yeah, let's make sure everybody gets a chance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hey, Mosey, Rob Mandel, the National Landing Bid. You kind of touched on this, and this is more of a comment, I think, to be more successful when this is being shared with the 23rd Street stakeholders, since we talked to them a lot, is how that switch happens with Crystal House and the 95 spaces departing. And I think it's 30 spaces are going to be incorporated into the building that's being built on that lot. But that leaves a delta of 65. So I think just putting myself in their shoes, they're going to want to understand that they won't hear any of this other great information, which I think reinforces what we've been saying for a long time, which there actually isn't a parking problem over there. But that this could put it into that scenario if all things remain equal. Which, my heart, I know they won't remain the same. People's trends and desires will change to accommodate the new scenario. But I think it's a good idea to have a strategy with how you talk about the delta and the 65 spaces.
Agree.
I think that was our final question.
All right, great. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'll go to the last slide again quickly so you can have contact information. I also put it in the chat, but feel free to reach out with any questions, comments. Right now, this is just a socialization effort of the report and the final study. But again, the plan is to review these recommendations and coordinate implementation in the short term. But again, we are eyes on the ball in terms of the numerous changes that are occurring in the area of.
Thank you for the information.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you. Do you guys want to introduce the next item?
Yeah.
I'm going to download the presentation and pull it up quick. Speak to this guy.
Robert Vaughn. So I'm with Dweck Properties. So the question has come up over months or years as to how are the site plans doing relative to affordable housing goals that are outlined in the various policy documents. So I tried to take a look at this and I put some thoughts together. After going through this, I don't know that my analysis is A, particularly good, or B, that I have a clear answer. I think I probably have more of a directional answer, but it's obviously contingent on lots of things happening that were planned, and then on things occurring in the future, which we don't know if those are going to happen or not. So I put together a series of very boring slides, and I apologize for those. But this is, I think, the start of looking into this, and this is something that we can kind of revisit, but I think provides more of like a baseline conceptual framework for potentially how to think about this.
Make sure those who are online can see it.
Yeah, very red. That's if you've ever been to any of my presentation, that's the Dweck red. So
It's a power move. Teamwork.
and then you gotta go here, right? All right, here we go. All right, so essentially what I did is I went through all of the previous site plans and tried to extract information. So the site plan, really the staff reports and the board reports are what provided the underlying data. The analysis is based on historic information. So it's difficult to apply the historic information, given that some of the information is rather dated at this point, and apply it to future scenarios. But it does provide at least a point in time comparison. And then the last thing, this analysis is generated by me. Yeah. So this looks at site plans to try and determine how the approvals to date compare to the policy goals for affordable housing outlined in the various sector plans and other related documents. So this analysis is generated by me. It's not generated by Dweck. It's certainly not generated by staff. So this is really me trying to tell you not to like pull this up in a future site plan and say, you said this at some point in time. So anyways. So both the Crystal City and Pentagon City sector plans have policy goals, very clear policy goals, I would say, outlined in those documents. The Pentagon City PDSP also has what looks to be a continuous goal for the affordable housing that should be provided with any development that occurs. Affordable housing for site plans primarily comes in the form of bonus density and related to new projects that their density exceeds the base density outlined within the various zoning ordinances, but there is also a base density component of the zoning ordinance that all site plans, regardless of whether you are requesting additional bonus density, have to comply with. And so this analysis looks at both the bonus and base density. And then lastly, really this analysis is intended to try and get at this question of how are we tracking relative to the goals? So Crystal City provides two metrics. So these are extracted from the sector plan. One is that this is up to 20% of the increased density above the 2008 GLUB. So this is a little bit different than the Pentagon City or Pentagon Center plans. And then it also stipulates an actual total. So it says that the Pentagon City sector or the Crystal City sector plan should have a total of 550 to 1,200 CAFs in the Crystal City planning area by 2050. So those are the two guideposts for Crystal City. The Pentagon City sector plan takes a slightly different approach and says that a minimum of 10% of the net new residential density should be affordable. So this is again looking at bonus density, and rather than setting kind of an aspirational goal, sets an absolute minimum from a policy standpoint. And then additionally, the sector plan notes that there are currently 342 approved existing CAFs within the study area. So 300 at Claridge House, then 42 at the James. But the 42 have been generated by projects that are located within the Crystal City. So in order to parse these out, it becomes very challenging. So I've made it even more complicated by both parsing it out at some points and looking at it together at some points, because it is a complicated issue to try and get at, given that the funds are constantly being shifted around as the opportunities present themselves. And then the Pentagon City PDSP, and this has been consistent going back to the 2005 approval, that there is a requirement that 10% of the net new residential density be 60% AMI for 30 years, so that they would be traditional CAFs. So both plans, or really all the plans, relate this affordable housing to bonus. And so I expanded on previous analysis that Mr. Matuzik had put together to look at, okay, how much bonus had the collection of 15 site plans generated? And then you can start to run some math to figure out what would be the associated policy goal. So through these 15 site plans, there has been approximately 4.4 million square feet of bonus density approved. Now that bonus density has to serve lots of different community goals. So it doesn't always go, or in some site plans, it doesn't go at all towards affordable housing, given that there are other priorities associated with open space, with infrastructure, that also start to come into the negotiation for how that bonus is allocated. 1.87 of that bonus is attributable to Amazon. So they are by far the largest the largest consumer of bonus density. 900,000 with Crystal Houses, and then the remaining 1.7 million over 8 separate site plans. So under the zoning ordinance, all site plans have to provide provide affordable housing associated with their base density. So their base density is also important in looking at the total impact on affordable housing from the approved projects. The ordinance provides 3 mechanisms that a developer can choose to satisfy their base density requirement. So they can provide cash, they can provide on-site units, or they can provide off-site units. I think 100% of these, I'm almost sure 100% of these, and I think probably 99% of site plans throughout Arlington County provide cash, just because that's how the math works. So in total, there has been $42 million of base density AHIF contributions associated with the approved site plans. And there's been $56 million in AHIF bonus. Now you can see that there are, so this, yes, added together. So how it works is you go through the project and you provide a check to Arlington County that goes into the general AHIF fund. The AHIF fund isn't necessarily restricted to investing in the location where the project is located. The AHIF fund needs to satisfy requests across the entire county. And this is where it gets incredibly difficult to understand how many affordable units are you trying, or how many affordable units are being generated by the impact of the development in a community. It, I would say, is impossible to do that, given that the requirements are inconsistent across the county, and the county likely has inconsistent needs related to affordable housing across the county. So there are a number of projects that have been approved. And one thing I should note is going through this, I know like within our portfolio, we have affordable units in properties that predate this analysis. So this analysis is inherently incomplete. And I don't know how many current CAFs there are in site plans that predate this analysis. So I just want to put that as a huge disclaimer. But from these 15 site plans, there are 133 on-site, and I'm using on-site very broadly in that a lot of these are located at the James, which is not in the location where the site plan was approved. So the total will be 98 with 2000, 2001. I don't know if 2000, 2001 has provided their CAFs yet at the James, but they should very soon, given the timing of that site plan approval. And then the remaining 35 to get to the 133 come from 223, 2250. The trigger for that is associated with a developer financing agreement on the 23rd Street realignment or an issuance of a building permit. JBG, I don't believe, has any plans on advancing either of those two in the near future. So take that as it will. They are approved, but not currently being advanced. So taking Pin Place out, because they're a huge consumer, they're not necessarily in the Crystal City. This is where I get to the point where I just made it really confusing. So there's 3 million of approved bonus within Crystal City. The 20% policy goal would get to 612,000 square feet of CAFs. You have to use a conversion factor. So I picked 1,000. I would say the conversion factors typically range maybe 800 up to a little bit more than that. But just using 1,000 gets a nice round number, gets you 612 CAFs. So again, this is a directional analysis, not a specific analysis. Have we generated 600 CAFs within the approved site plans? I think that's kind of the question. Each unit's 1,000 square feet. This analysis does not look at any of that. Yep. So talked about the bonus. Now I made it even more confusing. 122 in unit CAFs. I took out the 11 that are associated with the Pentagon Center PDSP. 98 million in AHIP contributions, 612 CAFs. There's 844 current affordable units at Crystal House Apartments. That's in the full updated plan where they just went back for additional density. And then there's a target of 550 to 1,200 CAFs within the Crystal City planning area. So that 1,200, that upper end, obviously assumes that lots more development will take place, right? The sector plan is intended to go out until 2050. So we are part way through what the plan was intended to accommodate. The interesting thing, and one of the difficulties, I think, has been how do you translate cash contributions to units? And so there are 3 site plans of the 15 that provide a dollar conversion within the board report. So Americana, Altair, and Crystal Towers. Altair, in that board report, that they very clearly articulated the total amount of affordable housing bonus in dollars and translated that into actually a specific number of units. So when you divide those, you can get essentially $1 per unit. Americana, the board report there also has something very similar. Crystal Towers, the board report for that only has the conversion between the cash being provided and offsite units. Really, how many units can you accommodate at Crystal Houses? So when you look at these, you essentially have 2 data points for on-site affordable value and off-site affordable value. If you average those, you can get to a metric you can use to apply to how AHIP contributions might translate into actual units. Now, huge disclaimer on this, right? This is a point in time. Crystal Houses is a very specific situation. It has a limited number of units. These values change with changes in overall macroeconomic factors and changes with value of development. So again, can't necessarily be applied in the future, but something I found to be interesting. So you can essentially apply those values and come up with an equivalence between on-site and off-site for each of the AHIF contributions. Now, it's not, if you were to take the approach that you get the most number of units by doing all off-site, right? Then you could get 1,234 units, but that assumes that you actually have enough capacity at a particular project for 1,234 units. Sorry. To this point, if you took the same AHIF contribution and you applied it to all offsite using the same 273,000, then it would support 360 units. And so you would say, okay, it's likely to range somewhere in the middle. You're not going to be at either end of the spectrum. And so some scenario might be that you have 133 committed on-site. If you take the full Crystal houses, affordable, and use AHIF contributions to support those off-site units, then you would get 844. You would say, I'm supporting the full thing. And it's probably actually going to be less than that. And then you can get an equivalence on what the remaining AHIF contributions from that 98 million would support in additional on-site units. So this is not I would say, specific analysis. I'd say that the realistic outcome here is probably somewhere in the middle. So it's probably somewhere less than that, because you're not going to apply all 844 units to offsite AHIF, but it at least gives kind of a guidepost or some kind of like logical step for saying, okay, how are we evaluating relative to the 550 to 1,200 that was outlined in the original Crystal City sector plan? Or how is it outlining relative to the 20% of bonus density that was saying that we should be, somewhere in the range of 600? So the other question is, how are you keeping up on a percentage basis? That Arlington County and their Affordable Housing Master Plan has a percentage target by 2040. I think it's 17.4. That's across the entire county. So you would anticipate that South Arlington is probably going to be less, given that incomes here are a little bit higher. You're going to have less marks. So by my count, and this doesn't include condos and this doesn't include single family houses, there are 13,000 apartment units in Crystal City, Pentagon City. There's an additional 775 units under construction and 2,600 units that are approved but not currently under construction. So if you took this 1,258, which also takes into account the 300 units at Claridge House, then you would be at 9.6% of this neighborhood being affordable relative to commercial apartments. If you add in the additional apartments that are currently approved but not constructed, as well as the 775 from 2000-2001, then that number is reduced to 7.6%. Again, that doesn't take into account condos or single-family homes. So there would also be additional affordable housing, obviously, provided with future projects. So as Matt mentioned previously, 12th Street Landing, Pentagon City future phases, some of the JBG projects, potentially some of the DWEC projects. We would also be providing additional affordable housing. But in summary, I think going through this analysis, I came to the conclusion that at the very least, especially given the opportunity at Crystal Houses, the policy goals are being achieved through the site plans that have been approved to date. I don't think that they're woefully behind what the policy goal was. Now, whether or not that policy goal needs to be reevaluated given the situation at Crystal House, that's a question not for me. Given that Penn Place is the only project within the Pentagon City sector plan, and that it's commercial, it actually wouldn't have a policy affordable housing associated with it. Now, it does have a massive AHIF contribution, so it is helping to support the overall goals of the area. There will be additional CAFs generated through future site plans. And then again, all of these are kind of subject to change as market conditions change, as county priorities change, and as different developments come through. So again, I think I did a pretty bad job of trying to answer this question. But the more I thought about it, the more difficult it became to try and come to a specific conclusion.
Needs to be working. If it was not, but only because probably of Crystal House.
Because of
Which
Crystal,
is a humongous
yes.
part of all of the numbers.
I would say because of Crystal House and the opportunity available there, the math is all working and the policy goals are being achieved.
But that wasn't necessarily anticipated when the policy was set up.
That
which
was not.
is the policy is flawed.
That's not a question for me.
No, I'm having sat in way too many site plans and heard all the arguments for and against.
Yep.
So I think I like what I see, but I recognize that absent that particular development, we'd be in a world of hurt.
Yes.
So what is the affordable housing definition? It's 80% of median, right?
So 60% AMI. And the other thing I would say is that typically CAFs are 60% AMI for 30 years. And at the 30-year, that covenant expires. So those units revert back to being market rate units. Additionally, at Crystal House, those CAFs are 99-year CAFs. So yeah, so now they're extended up to 100, 120 year, 130 years.
But I looked at the rents that they're asking for these affordable units. They're still pretty high.
It's based off of area median income.
Okay. Yeah.
So the area median income in Arlington is very, very high.
Yeah.
So,
but then the firemen, the policemen, the service, the county, they like to live maybe in the county.
so whether or not, yeah. It ranges, but whether or not there should be a re-examination of the CAF definition is again not a question for me, but maybe something that should be brought up.
Thanks, Robert. It's really interesting. I want to look at the slides and things. But I'm glad, I mean, this is something that's just really interesting. I'm wondering if this is kind of where you're going, where there's sort of a bit of an existential policy question around Crystal House aligned with goals and right, regardless of how Crystal House is financed directly, whether it's 100% all cash, right, where the money's coming from, is it that we are getting units that match that PAYHIF income or output? It doesn't matter where, right? And it goes in, it goes out, you're not tracking which, the influence and outflows of that. And is that policy goal? And this is right, this is like county board, or like at least MAT level kind of question. And I think it's kind of it's an interesting thing. Is that kind of you're getting that? Like we really need to ponder and think about like I can get to that.
I'm not sure that I'm driving at a
yeah.
I'm not sure that I'm driving at a specific outcome.
Yeah.
I was more just evaluating the information that's available and trying to tease out outcomes. But you could get a situation like there are going to be AHIF requests all over the county. So even though you're generating $100 million here, that money might go somewhere else.
Right.
Now, is that it's at the county board to determine whether or not that's in the best interest of the county. But if you wanted to try and say, is Pentagon City doing its part? Right? Then you would say, maybe, yes. Right now, whether or not you have the same equivalency on a dollar to unit conversion at Barcroft that you do at Crystal House, I don't know. But if it's close, then you would say, yes. Then even though the affordable units aren't being located here, we are generating affordable units within the policy goal.
And I just say also, there's always a discussion when affordable housing, the allocated units come up, right? is it better to have 100% affordable housing? Is mixed income better? When we have new like development, like the chart about the equivalencies, and I'm really interested in what you're gonna say, but it's really relevant. Like, is it better? And this is again a values question to have, let's say, in 5 CAFs on site in a new development, or 15, 20 off site somewhere else. And I think kind of these are just really interesting questions, I think, that are worth talking through and getting like feedback from the county board and leadership on.
So I think going back to your point, though, when you look at, I think the county would have to take all the money that gets from all the plans, you know, and then you would have to look at how much is coming in and from where, and then where does that money, what projects does it go into, right? Because you can't judge, that was my point in the previous meeting, I was like, well, we're all contributing all this money, but that it doesn't mean we're creating units in Crystal City, right? Right, so are we meeting our goal or not meeting our goal, which is, I think, your point, but the point I would make about the cash contribution versus the on-site, and there's a lot of discussion, obviously, about mixed income communities, and I heard somebody mention YTAC, you know, low income housing tax credit, which you can't get unless you do 100% affordable. So there's like all kinds of issues, right? We don't have access as developers to all these affordable housing tools to create more affordable housing in our projects. And the affordable housing we have to do now it's very cumbersome, which is why it's much easier for us to get cash contributions. If we develop a new building, and I'll make it up, let's say it costs 500,000 a unit to build a new building. It's probably, but let's just say that's the number. And you could go and buy, you know, you could go through the housing fund and you could go buy units at, you know, a project that's very nice, that's at 300,000, right? You're generating, or to say it's 250, you're generating twice as many affordable housing units. So when we start looking at, you know, the most effective way to deploy the money, that's why you have such a hard time, because you buy so many more affordable units if you do it on that level. Because as you said with Altair, we were, you know, ascribing a value to brand new units, which makes less units, right? Because it's a new project, and that's the rub. Is like, yep. You know, where is it more efficient to do it? And, you know, is it better to have a mixed income community? And there should be tools to incentivize mixed income communities for developers, as opposed to just having to do 100% affordable. That's just giving you some background on it. It's a county goal. It's a county.
So there's both policy goals for the small areas, and then there is an overall county goal outlined in the Affordable Housing Master Plan, and how all of those things, and then there's also, you know, plans for Roslyn and Courthouse, and right, like how all of those plans fit together is why I don't work at staff, right? That seems really hard.
Is the relationship is mutual, right? There might be projects here that at some point provided cash towards the aid fund that were used somewhere else. There may be a Roslyn or Boston project that contributed aid money that was used here. So it does work both ways in that respect. I think the other piece that Robert was getting to as well is there's CAFs that have been delivered prior to kind of our baseline starting point. And I think from a county housing perspective, there are also kind of a secondary tier of what we call affordable. Definitions are everything here. And those are the market rate affordable projects where units are simply because of their age or condition, you're affordable compared to what a new project might charge for even rental units. And that's a pretty substantial inventory, even in this area. And we do have a tool online that allows you to kind of map out where those are. And they do vary, 60% AMI to 80% AMI. So a lot of definitions at play, including the year commitment. You know, I would argue that, you know, if we are counting what an official committed unit is, if we typically say that's a 30-year commitment, it's what we're getting at Crystal Houses 3 times as much. We would find another factor because it's 99 years. So this can go so many different ways. But yeah, I just wanted that.
Can you touch real quick on what happens when that 30 years?
It just, that
Matt, could you touch on what happens when that 30 years expires? Because I think that's an important part of the equation too.
the covenant within the legal language says that it naturally expires after 30 years. So you go and you record a document on property title that says, hey, this unit is going to be affordable for the term of 30 years. After 30 years, this covenant expires, so it goes away. And then that unit has the opportunity, if the property owner wants to, they no longer have a restriction on what they can charge.
I could be naive about this, but my understanding was that at least locally, a lot of times they'd be using AHIP funds. Is that possible? Did I get that right?
It has happened in the past, primarily with our nonprofit partners, which are regularly tracking some of those earlier developments that are like at year 28, 29, they know what's coming. I think what Robert alluded to is really what happens in the market rate projects where I've got a handful of units, they're at year 28, 29. Who's catching that?
Yeah.
Can't we negotiate? Is there AHIP available? So a lot of questions and kind of run into the same, issue of what's a priority that given year? We're gonna go after that or is it something else?
Thank you.
Absolutely fabulous.
So I think you explained the offsite because this I was wondering, all these units are going to be along Columbia Pike, right? Because we don't want them here, right? I mean,
From the staff reports, all they did was make a dollar to unit equivalency where they essentially indicated that the dollars would go much further if they were applied offsite to an existing building or to an AHIF request, as opposed to being in on-site market rate new developments.
B&Bs are now in the buildings, which reduces the number of units for residents. So which units would be counted towards the percentage of units that need to be affordable? Are the Airbnbs taken out, which can be 25% of them?
I don't know that I'm qualified to answer that, honestly. I apologize.
Well, I mean, none of your unit are Airbnb. You don't allow your.
We don't allow Airbnb in our buildings.
Well, you're fine.
Yes,
You're fine.
I'm not.
We live in Crystal Towers. We see them come in.
To clarify that I believe sometimes the colloquial definition of Airbnb should be expanded to a short-term rental, and WEC does do that.
We do have a limited number of short-term rental units. We do not have Airbnb units. We constantly police our buildings. If people are leasing on Airbnb, we take them down. Short-term stay. Yeah, I think that's at Millennium. That's not at our project.
Yeah, that's what they were approving. I don't want to speak, but I think they were doing that because there's such a demand given over.
So are those corporate apartments counted in the number of available apartments for people who actually want to live here, work here and want to live here? And then the percentage of those that should be affordable would be different.
So change your total number.
Yeah.
Are you reducing the number of short-term when you're looking at the total?
Yeah.
Have that number.
Yeah, and the policy goal is really related to new development.
I just want to table this because I actually feel strongly about it too. Maria was my neighbor. The unit next to them, it's Airbnb. I think this could be an agenda item for the next meeting. I think residents of this neighborhood feel very strongly about it. The that the board approved the Millennium to have Airbnbs and Hotel.com. I have been in the Gramercy. I have run into someone in the elevator who booked it on Hotels.com. It's a problem. I didn't sign up as a renter to live in a building with Airbnb down my hallway where they treat the concierge like a hotel concierge. So this is actually a serious issue for this neighborhood. We are in high-rise buildings next to the airport. But I don't think this is the kind of place to have this conversation, if that's fair. So I just want to keep this offline, but so we feel very strongly about it. So I think it's a topic for a later conversation.
Pause for a second. I think we did answer your core question. Yeah. It was when you take, I can take it.
Yeah, that was the question. I mean,
I want to just, we're past 8 o'clock. Yeah, those gave us the page, so we're gonna need to wrap up. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. But when you are taking these numbers, you are inherently problematically inflating them if you are looking at a total that is not completely accessible to long-term residents. And this is all in consideration of the fact that this is really great analysis, truly.
Yes.
But I also think it highlights the fact that, to your point, it doesn't showcase the correct numbers of what is truly accessible for a resident versus a long-term renter.
Just for clarification, like our building, we don't do more than 5%. Not more than 5% of what we consider more commercial units. But other people have different policies around that, but there's a lot of risk for us to have that, especially the pandemic highlighted that risk. So there's a lot less than you think, I would guess, especially after the pandemic, but I can't speak for other property owners.
I 100% support what Robert knows. This isn't a voluntary thing they're doing. It's happening kind of behind their backs, so it's out of control. It's something I think we need to work with you as a county as a partner on. They do monitor it, but I have noticed it as a long-term resident on and off 14, 15 years. It's a real challenge. Judy, I you've noticed it too. It's happening at all the buildings. And so I do think this is an important conversation to have. Maybe not in this forum, maybe it's a neighborhood group, maybe it's a civic association, but it's very concerning. And it's not intentional. I don't think anyone is doing this on purpose. So I think we all need to take a breath, get on the same page, and at some point discuss it.
I have
Great, thanks. I do want to, we are past 8 o'clock.
Yeah, one more item, guys, one more item.
Yeah, one more item. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we have one more item.
One item, yes.
For commission members.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is. Actually, let me share the screen. I always forget this part. Should not take long. There we go. So what ends up happening, and I learned this recently, is that just about every year now, the General Assembly prepares updates, however minor, to the policies regulating how groups like these and many others are able to meet throughout the year, particularly when the need is to meet virtually. This kind of started during the pandemic, it evolved. It does mean something different if it's a group that was appointed by the county board. It means very different elements for groups that were appointed by the county manager, subtle technical difference. Yeah, so we are not at the upper level where you have the planning commission or the BZA or the county board. So they have like their own rules, but we are part of a larger system. There's like 50 other commissions and committees that I think kind of fall where we are. And what ends up happening is every July, we can expect to get an updated set of policy standards. It's really just 2 to 3 pages of guidance. And And I think in this past July, there was a handful of things that were updated to reflect what we've been operating under last year. I think we shared like a slide just capturing what those are. The biggest piece is really if you can't make a meeting in person, the way you would communicate with Mike as the chair or Robert as the vice chair. There's some guidance there. And then really when we are meeting virtually, the expectation is that everybody has their video on so that if anybody's joining, it's a public meeting, we can kind of see who's speaking and we can kind of collect attendance that way. So again, just evolving standards. We're going to probably see some updates next July, but what we are obligated to do in order to keep meeting, particularly in December, where our next fourth quarterly meeting will be virtual, we do need to kind of just signal that we approve this latest version that we emailed around. So I don't know if Mike, you wanted to add anything else?
Yeah, that's it. We want to meet in December. Do that, we have to approve the policy. And the big change, I think, really is if you're virtual, you gotta keep your camera on. And if you turn it off, we have to like note that you were not present. Please send. Right, yeah, so that was the main kind of practical thing that's changed in this company.
Yeah, and it's still the application of, 2 virtual, 2 in-person meetings per year still applies. That hasn't changed. And if you were to compare this year's to last year's, it's almost identical. Yeah.
That
exempt you from the on-camera.
No, we all get to have guest appearances.
Yeah.
I can follow up. We actually have a whole team in communications dedicated to it. Yes. Maybe just reduce the lighting or kind of. It doesn't say anything about that. I'm putting my attorney hat on right there.
Yeah. Yes, so if you're a commission member, want to take a quick vote. Okay, so the virtual meeting policy has been amended. We've reviewed the changes, which is basically keep the camera on. And we need to have a vote now. If you're a commission member, if you're in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. Okay, anybody opposed?
Sorry, I'm under the slap for one side.
All right, good. So the motion passes.
Great.
Great. Okay, so that's it for tonight. I really appreciate the input. Let's see, the next meeting will be virtual now, December 9th, and put together an agenda. We'll see if we can pick up some topics from this evening. So there's some great discussion. And thanks for coming out on the rainy night.